Hey you! You probably have heard of the World Trade Organization and were wondering what it actually does, who has the power, who benefits from it, and why you should care about it. Let's get back in time to understand the idea, mechanics, and goals behind the World Trade Organization.
I'm new to this whole YouTube thing and I want to improve myself to give you better content. I want to talk with you about economics, its history, its impact, and also why it's important for us all and therefore understand the world a little bit better. If you are interested in these topics or you just want to see the channel grow, please do not forget to click subscribe. Also, please let me know in the comments below what I can do better and what topics you're interested in. With this out of the way, let's go back to the video.
The WTO is the world's largest international economic organization with 164 member states and 23 observers representing over 98% of global trade and GDP. An international organization is an organization established by a treaty or other instrument, governed by international law and possessing its own legal personality. With picking up their work just in 1995, it established itself rather late and is the direct successor to the General Agreement on Tariffs on Trade, also called the GATT, which we will look in more detail later on. The core competences of the World Trade Organization are the coordination of economic policies of the member states and the dispute settlement. The economic policy is in cooperation with the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and other international institutions, and includes consulting the member states to coordinate the international economic policy. For the dispute settlement, the World Trade Organization established the Dispute Settlement Body, which helps to settle disputes between the member states and their regulations. As the World Trade Organization is an international organization and part of the international law, the rules of the World Trade Organization themselves are not directly part of the law of each member state, but the members are obligated to transfer the rules into their laws. The goal of the World Trade Organization is to have a uniformity of global trade regulations. For this, the principles are based on three big pillars: the GATT, the GATS, and the TRIPS. These principles are also based on the idea of reciprocity, which means the granting of mutual concessions in tariff rates, quotas, or other commercial restrictions. Reciprocity implies that these concessions are neither intended nor expected to be generalized to other countries with which the contracting parties have commercial treaties. Reciprocity agreements may be made between individual countries or groups of countries. GATT, being the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, implies the idea of abolishing governmental trade restrictions, continuous reduction of tariffs, most favored nation principles, and the principle of national treatment. GATS is the General Agreement on Trade and Services, which especially includes the services of banking, insurances, or consulting firms. TRIPS are the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, especially to prevent from counterfeits and protecting patents, intellectual rights, designs, etc. Besides these three main pillars, there are multiple subsidiary agreements which usually are obligatory, as well as the World Trade Organization rather has a all-or-nothing principle in their rules. After knowing what the World Trade Organization is doing, let's go back in history to understand the origin and the idea of the GATT a little bit better and why it was implemented in the first place. In late 1947, the GATT was signed as a legal agreement between 23 countries and was considered to be an interim solution before the International Trade Organization will be established, which ended up as the World Trade Organization in 1995. The negotiations for the GATT treaty went back to 1941 and intensified with the Bretton Woods Conference, which also ended in the foundation of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. The GATT functioned as the trade policy counterparty to the Monetary Fund, with the strong goal to provide a free access to natural resources, better the conditions in the international trade, and in general promoting a liberal global trade policy. Everyone who wanted to participate had also become a member of the International Monetary Fund. Therefore, the USA had all the vehicles to not just take the political and military leading role, but also for trade and economic related policies. This dominance is also shown on the status of the dollar as world currency, which was named as the key currency in the treaties. This is further underlined that the US had from the beginning a blocking minority in the World Bank and the Monetary Fund. Without the approval of the USA, it was not possible to agree on any resolutions. Another indicator of the power of the USA is that all the presidents of the World Bank have been American citizens, except from Kristalina Georgieva, who led the World Bank interimswise in 2019. With the construct of the GATT, the USA was controlling, together with the other nations, more than 70% of all monetary reserves, with American banks being until the end of the 16th the biggest financiers for international credits. Therefore, the fiscal and economic decisions by the American government also decided the developments of the international trade and the international capital market. The Eastern Bloc around the Soviet Union, except from Czechoslovakia, was excluded from all these treaties and institutions, which further amplified the rising bipolarity during the Cold War. The development of the two different economic systems between the East and the West was therefore a special form of the Cold War and did not just lead to a shift in the available markets, but also often stifled the national freedom of the countries which were bandwagoning with either the US or the Soviet Union. Within 15 years, the GATT treaties were ratified by 63 nations, which made up 80% of the international trade. There are several criticisms on the World Trade Organization, vocalized especially by non-governmental organizations. I will not mention all of them, but just these which are, in my opinion, the most important ones. One major concern is that multinational companies and economy-friendly lobbyist groups have too much of an influence on the decision-making process of the World Trade Organization. As the regulations are part of international law and have to be implemented in the individual law, the potential policies on social aspects, employment protection, environmental protection, and other aspects and fields have to be limited and have to step back behind the regulations of the World Trade Organizations. Probably the biggest criticism against the World Trade Organization is regarding the impact between the industrialized nations and the so-called Global South, the less developed countries. Especially less developed countries are dependent on tariffs, as they usually don't have an effective administration to finance themselves via taxation or other forms of income. The World Trade Organization does not allow for raising tariffs, so that once tariffs are lowered, they are frozen on that level. Furthermore, the industries of the less developed countries, especially the agriculture for example, are often not competitive to multinational companies, which are often heavily subsidized, especially in the agriculture. To make money, the agriculture needs to grow products which are generating higher income on the world market. Therefore, the security of providing enough food is undermined as farmers might not grow staple food anymore, which then need to be imported, leading to a higher dependency on the global market, being more vulnerable to external shocks. Regarding the low competitive capacity, especially in agriculture in less developed countries, farmers are working on small lot of land, letting them compete with huge industrialized companies, which have on the one side a big advantage on the scaling side, on the other side often can take advantage of subsidies. Therefore, the small farmers are heavily disadvantaged by the policies of the World Trade Organization. In my opinion, I really do think that the USA is in an extraordinary situation with the World Trade Organization, and after the end of the Cold War, I would have liked to see more institutionalism in the world with a more democratic approach in the world community. But it's unlikely that US will just relinquish its hegemony. I do believe in free trade and think that it's good that the global trade is more structured and institutionalized with the World Trade Organization. However, I agree on the criticism on the World Trade Organization in regard of the relation with developing countries. Even though there are some special arrangements for these countries, which I did not cover in this video, I think the concept of reciprocity is way more to an advantage of the industrialized nations and its multinational companies. But this is just my opinion. What about you? Do you think we need an institution like the World Trade Organization? Or is it just another tool for the US or the West to maintain their power? What is your idea how the international trade should be structured? Is there something you want to hear more about? Or what other topics you want me to cover? Let me know in the comments below. Also, check my other videos, like the one where I talk about the gold and silver that was stolen by the Spaniards from Latin America. And do not forget to click subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.